And
Wow.
and after I left Acme, they had a couple of shows. They weren't nothing to brag about. They had Harvey Kurtzman and Bill Gaines, and they had a show with John Byrne, and they had a show with Steranko and Gray Morrow. I mean, they had a bunch of hacks. They had bums. Nobody wants to talk about that junk. But
they got the bums, huh?
Yeah. That's the only show I ever went to that I wasn't involved in for them, is because I didn't care what slings and arrows, whatever anybody said. I didn't care. I was going to meet Harvey Kurtzman because Harvey Kurtzman was one of my all-time heroes. And I went up to Harvey Kurtzman. There was one guy at this table, and I walked up and I got a bunch of junk. I just gotten out of the hospital from having a kidney transplant, and I walked up to his table, and I said, Mr. Kurtzman, I just want to let you know that I think you're the greatest comic book artist in the world. And he looked at me, and he was having Parkinson's, so he's a little delayed. And he looked at me and he goes, well, I'll tell you one thing. You got good taste. And I was like, I said, hell yeah. I said, let you know, Mr. He goes, no, call me Hobby. I said, okay. I said, I got some more stuff in my car, but I didn't have enough guts to bring it all in. He goes, that's what I'm here for, John. You bring anything you want, I'll sign all day. I'll sign all day. And I sent a buddy of mine out to the car to get them, and do it, and got my stuff signed. And he would draw all over everything. And I mean, it's just wonderful. I mean, Greensboro is really funny because this triad of Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point, it's always been like a hotbed for comics. And there's always been people that collected and always people that read. And they must have sold a ton of them. Because, even though you get somebody, for example, like an Eisner, who to the average comic book fan, he didn't do Avengers, he didn't do Superman, you know what I mean? It's like, but people knew, and people would come. They would show up. And Seth, confidentially, I never threw a comic book convention in my life for everybody else. It was all a lie. The only reason why I threw them is because I wanted to meet one guy. And that's why we throw the shows, to get one guy. And the stuff that got away from me, you'd never believe. I tried forever to get Jack Davis. And he lives in Savannah, Georgia. Right outside of Savannah. He wasn't that far away. Couldn't get him. Tried for 4 or 5 years to get Johnny Craig to come. Finally, he said, don't give up on me, John. Don't give up on me. And I couldn't get him. And I tried to get Johnny Severin. I was going to pay for him and his wife to fly from Colorado. And it just fell apart. It just didn't work. And it was crushing because I would try to get guys that I knew most people wouldn't get. But if you got a brain, you know about comics history, you would jump all over that. You go, oh my God, I get a chance to meet that guy. I mean, they're doing a documentary now on Dave Stevens. And I asked Al, I said, well, we got this convention, my first convention coming up with Al and George and Angelo. I said, I think it'd be cool if we get Dave Stevens because he's like young and cool and, Rocketeer's pretty hot. It's just getting started. It's pretty cool. And Al goes, oh, that's great. Here's his phone number. Give him a call. Tell him I called. Tell him I sent you. I said, okay. So I called up Dave, got him on the first call. And there was this, his voice was great. He was like, all right, who is this? I said, this is John Hitchcock from Greensboro, North Carolina. Yeah, okay. I said, I'd like to invite you to a comic book convention. Really? A comic book convention? He goes, I said, yeah. I said, he said, how'd you get my phone number? I said, well, Al Williamson gave it to me. He goes, oh, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, well, who are your guests your next show? I went, right now we've got Al Williamson, George Evans, and Angelo Torres. And he goes, wait a minute. You got Al and George coming to your show? He said, shit, count me in. I'm there. Because he was exactly like us. He loved comics. Dave loved comics. And he dropped everything and came to the show because he wanted to. He had a bag of stuff to get autographed. I mean, he's just like us. He loved it. He loved it. He loved comics. It's like when I met Bruce Timm for the first time. I mean, he was a wonderful guy. I mean, he's one of the guys that when all the older guys started passing away, I said, I'd really like to meet this guy. And I fortunately got to be kind of a friend of his. I mean, I see him at San Diego. And he used to do this thing. This is off subject, but it's a great story. He was
I love good stories.
he would sit there at a table and he had these plastic buttons. And he could take the button apart and you could do a drawing and put it in the button, and he was selling these buttons for $20. And it said, name the character and I'll draw this for you. And so I walked up and I'm like, man, that's I know the style. I said, that's got to be, Bruce Timm. And we all know about the Batman and the Justice League and the Superman, the cartoons. I mean, good God. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, so I'm standing there, and somebody in front of me goes, "Hey, man," he goes, "Hey, Bruce, could you draw me a juggernaut?" And Tim goes, "That's interesting. I don't think I've ever drawn the juggernaut. It'll take a minute." And I went, think Alex Toth. And he goes, and the big guy goes, "Hey, man, Alex Toth didn't do no juggernaut." And Bruce Tim goes, "Yes, he did." And I went, "X-Men number 12. Yes, he did. He did do Juggernaut." And he goes, and then Bruce looks at me and he goes, "Wait a minute." And he looks, and he goes, "Are you John Hitchcock from the Dear John Alex Toth book?" I said, "Yeah, it's me." He goes, "Come around the table, sit down, we got to talk." And I sat there with the guy for about 45 minutes, and all we did was talk about comics, And it's cool. It's like suddenly he becomes, and that's the magic. These guys that are legendary guys, suddenly you realize they become that 14, 15-year-old kid who loves it as much as you do. And it happened over and over and over. If you went up to Murphy Anderson, or you went up to Al Williamson, or you went up to Gil Kane, and you brought up either Jack Cole or Lou Fine, you were in, buddy. You were in. Because that means that you knew you were a cut above. You knew what was going on. You knew your history. And they just want to talk to you about comics. And you sit there and you learn from them, and you have a good time. It was great. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Hey, John, if someone suddenly says to themselves, "Okay, I'm going to be in Greensboro at some point. I want to check out where all this action is." Can we tell everybody where they can come find you in the comic shop?
Well, I'm here. We're open 6 hours a day from 12 to 6. I'm here most of the time. But we're in Greensboro at 906 Spring Garden Street. You can email me on Facebook at Parts Unknown and say, "Hey, I'm going to be coming through. Can you make sure to be there?" I'll be glad to.
Okay, because Matt never tells us the name of his comic shop. He just tells us he's going to his LCS. I've never heard the name before until now, and I'm like, at some point, I got to tell people where this place is.
Well,
they might actually want to go there.
I chose the name Parts Unknown because I'm also a big professional wrestling fan, and when I was a kid, they used to go, "Ladies and gentlemen, from Parts Unknown, Weight Unknown, the Assassins." The Assassins. That's a great name for a store, Parts Unknown. So when I said Parts Unknown, underneath it, I say the comic book store. Because we don't do games, we don't do cards, we don't do dice, we don't do Pokemon, we don't do Magic, we don't do any of that junk. All we do is comic books. And it's been that way for 31 years. All we do is sell comic books. And we do well. I mean, I'm not rich, but we do well. And we kept the place open. And it's, we celebrate comics every day. I mean, that's what we do, is we love comic books. And there isn't a kid that goes into this store. If he's never had a comic, he's getting one when he leaves. Maybe I can get the next generation. I don't know. But it's, that's got to be tough, because you got to make sure you give him one that's appropriate. But if you know a little bit about comics, you don't have to really worry about that. You're not going to hand an 8-year-old kid Omaha the Cat Dancer. It's not going to happen.
No.
You got to be careful. I've only had 2 comic books returned to me in my whole life. One of them was a Chris Falusi comic that had some sexual overtone to it. But the kid I sold it to was a big kid who said he wanted the book because he was learning to draw and he was copying this stuff. And his mother made him bring it back. And the other one that was returned, believe it or not, was Ambush Bug #1. And you're going to say, what? And I say, the reason why is this couple had their kids in the car and they were doing this long drive and they started reading Ambush Bug in the car. And there's a thing where Ambush Bug's talking about, you get charged, you plea bargain down, you get your lawyer and you get away free, and just make a big joke out of it. And all the kids, they're in the cars laughing and everything. And the mother suddenly said, "I think we want our kids to believe in the law before we start making fun of the law. So you got to take this one back." And I said, "Yes, ma'am. I totally understand. That is totally cool." I told that story to Julie Swartz, who was the editor of that book, and he just started laughing. He goes, "Oh my God!" I said, "I know." But those are the only 2 times anybody ever returned anything because they were angry about it. So we try real hard. Once people are into teenagers, they're going to love comics. They're going to love superhero comics. They're going to love all kinds of comics. But then they get to a certain age, that's when you have to turn them on to, Eisner and some of the underground stuff. That's when you turn them on to, and you kind of feel them out, and and that's when you give them to Peter Bagg or Daniel Clowes or Hernandez Brothers. You give them stuff like that, which is really smart stuff, and it's fun stuff. One of the big linchpins here is if you've been reading a bunch of superhero comics and you start to kind of fade out, I will sell you a Blazing Combat in a heartbeat and tell them the story about it and about how it's one of the greatest comics ever done. It only lasted 4 issues, and the best artist in the world worked on that book. And of course, my favorite writer, Archie Goodwin, was the writer and editor of that book. And once you get them that, they'll come back in and go, "Where's something as good as that?" And you go, "Well, sorry, kid, there's nothing that good, but I can turn it on to something else." And slowly try. That's when you get them to, you might try an Eisner book, The Dreamer. There's certain things you may try, and hopefully, you aren't overshooting, your boundaries as far as those kids are, concerned. Because if you give them something that's a little bit too sophisticated, it'll turn them off, and you got to be real careful about it.
Right.
I rarely screw up on that, but this lady came in with her daughter. Her daughter was about 5'9" and pretty girl. She's wearing her mask, of course, and her mother was asking the questions for her. And I sold her an Eisner comic sequential art Eisner book, and I explained it to them. And I said, this is a book that you need to read once and then put it down. Then you need to reread it and take your time because this will help you with drawing because it's about storytelling, and that's where the power of comics are. And the girl's getting ready to go out the door, and they bought the book, and the mother's thankful, and everything's really cool. And then I went, "Oh, by the way, how old are you?" And the little girl looks at me. This girl looks at me, and she goes, "I'm 12." And I was almost ready to give me that book back. It's written way over your head. You're never going to get it. But then it was too late. They already bought it, and they're walking out the door, and I'm like, "Shit, I screwed up. I should have." You looked at her, and you go, she's young, she's tall, she's hot. I mean, she's got to be. She's got to be, but they never came back, and I feel bad because there's 2 other Eisner books that she should have, because it's about storytelling. But
right.
What can I say? But yeah, anytime anybody wants to come by, it's Parts Unknown here in Greensboro, and that's what we do is comics. We talk comics, and sometimes we talk wrestling. And just go on and on. You got to get me on wrestling. It's worse.
He's got a wrestling book too that we're not going to let him talk about. But yeah, I'll give you you can put it in the show notes.
Let's
do that.
You can get it's Front Row Section D. You can only get it on Amazon right now. It's the story of my obsession with professional wrestling, from a kid to a teenager to watching it on TV to going to the matches, to sitting on the front row and dressing up in coat and ties and cheering for the bad guys and stirring the shit up. And people wanted to kill us. And I went once dressed as a Russian and stirred it up even worse. People wanted to kill me because I was cheering for the Russians. And of course I would talk like Ivan Koloff and go, "You are stupid, old lady. I'm here to cheer for family. I got a green card." And they bought it hook, line. They took it hook, line, and sinker. They believed every word of it. You got them hooked, you play them. And then finally when I on one of the smaller New Dimension Wrestling, small local thing, I actually did get in the ring, and I was the loudmouth bodyguard pussy. That's the only way to say it, because I would talk all this trash, and I'd take one punch, and I'd go down, and that was it. Kids would walk up to me after the show and says, "Well, how come you didn't want that guy? You're a lot bigger than him." I said, "Well, I have to admit, I'm just not all that great. I'm kind of sick. Try to leave it alone." But we had so much fun with that. It was great. So that's what that book's about, and it's fun. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a comedy. If you don't get a laugh out of it, I didn't do my job. That's really what it's about. But I take that stuff. I take professional wrestling really, really seriously. But to me, it was always a form of. It was my entertainment when I was growing up. It's something we all went to do. And people think I'm joking, but when you grew up in North Carolina, especially in Greensboro area or Raleigh area, they would have Thanksgiving cards, and they would have the best wrestlers in the world would come in from all over the place for these cards, and it'd be over. At this one time, it was like 15,500 people. Couldn't get a ticket, couldn't get in. Place was packed. And you get up on Thanksgiving, and you'd have your turkey, and you'd watch the Detroit Lions lose a football game, and then you take a nap, and then you get your stuff ready, and you go to the Coliseum and watch the wrestling. And that's what we did. And not me, everybody did it. Everybody. Now wrestling's kind of like the circus that comes into town every once in a while, and nobody really cares. They want to see the TV stars. But when I was growing up, it was Jim Crockett Promotions out of Charlotte. That was your home team. We didn't have we had the Carolina Cougars in the 70s in the ABA, but we didn't really have that's one of the reasons why college basketball is so big in North Carolina, because we didn't have a professional team until the Panthers came in 20-some years ago. What you did is you watched it on television, but the wrestling was something you did, and it was great. We got to see everybody. I mean, everybody was anybody we got to see. Saw Ric Flair from his first match all the way through. We got to see all the greats, the Four Horsemen. Got to see everybody. It was incredible.
Wow. John, I just want to say thank you, one, for giving me close to 2 hours of your time, man. I mean, we got a little late start on the whole technology thing, and I appreciate Matt. Matt, you're like the facilitator, man. You were the guy trying to figure out what was going on, and then you figured out this great solution, which I'm just going to apologize because, I don't know how the audio quality is going to turn out, but hopefully because you guys are closest to the mic, you guys are going to sound great. I don't care how I sound. They want to hear you. And, that's the best part for me, man. I appreciate the fact that, last year I got a chance to talk with Danny Fingeroff, and he's a Marvel comics guy who's now the chair of the Will Eisner. He sat down with me to sort of give me some great history and some insight for what it's like being the chair of the Will Eisner Week and all that. But it was interesting how from that point on, more and more I've had the chance to explore and grow. And then talking with Matt, he's just an encyclopedia of great, classic comics. And when he was like, yeah, man, but I don't get all my stories on my own. Like, I got a source too. And when he told me you were down to sit down and shoot my ear off for as long as I'd let you, or as long as we could make the time for it, or technology and everything else, man, I just wanted to say thank you. Because everything you were given, I wasn't joking. That treasure chest, it was more than gold. It was more than diamonds. It was more than rubies. I mean, you were telling stories that people are going to hear later on and go, how come nobody else tells that? Where's this story been?
Well, you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen is like when I go to San Diego sometimes and somebody be telling a story and I go, wait a minute, that's my story, asshole. That's you're taking that happened to me. What are you doing? And that happens so many times. But like I said, I was really lucky, and I if I knew there was going to be somebody that I'd never met before that I wanted to meet, I would do whatever it took to get there because I wanted to meet them and talk to them and maybe learn something. I mean, maybe you learn a little bit. And Matt and I were talking about this last week or so. If it wasn't for the fans, so much of comics history would be gone because nobody respects it and loves it like the fans. And that's why this stuff is being saved. And I think that's what's really important.
How much has been forgotten already?
I mean, I'm hoping to do one more book. I have one more in me. It's going to be all the stories about comic book people and wrestling people and all kinds of stuff. And just say, okay, here it is. Here's these stories. It's goofy. I don't care if you make fun of me. It's okay. It wouldn't be the first time and it won't be the last. But
if you need another pair of eyes, I will happily copy edit all that for you.
But it's going to be fun. But see, that's something that I want to do. And I just got to get some discipline and get to it. But still, that's what our goal is. But anyway, I appreciate you guys taking the time. Anytime.
Oh, man.
We'll have some fun.
It's no problem. And by the way, if you want to do this like this, hey, we'll just make a recording call with me and Matt and you whenever it's possible. We'll get all these written down and then, just flip it around. But however you want to do it, that's a book of stories I think people, I know I would love to read. I know anybody who's listening today would have been like, yeah? So how can I help you get this book out there? 'Cause I want to hear these stories. I want to read these stories. I want to talk about these stories with my friends. And that's
the good thing is those people, all those people were so nice, I mean, you can't underscore that,
That's a whole separate book.
I gotta go.
Weren't nice.
I gotta go.
Okay. Hey, Matt, John, thank you both so much. Thank you both for making this happen. Thank you for your time. And man, I'm gonna find my way out to North Carolina. I'm gonna find my way to Greensboro, and I'm gonna find myself the parts that I know.
Okay.
It's gonna happen.
All right.
So you might come by. You might come by.
That?
You might come by. We're in South Carolina, North Carolina.